Uh, I don't. Sorry if anyone is jumping over from the fake stream that started. As you probably can tell, I'm pretty terrible at streaming consistently. So I think last time I did a stream, I set it on 720p, and this time I started a new stream with the title of the last stream for about 20 seconds. So yeah, I hope you're all doing well and more competent this December than I am. Yeah, let's just take it. Let's do a slow start. Let's do a slow boiling the frog tonight. How's everybody doing? If chat is here, hello BP. I have got it on this kind of standard delay. Let me just check if this goes a bit better in YouTube Studio before we get deep in. There's 9 people. Okay, that's all right. We can do that. We can go here. Yeah. So we're going to do some talk about penmanship. I don't know if this is going to attract a lot of viewers. But I'm doing some research on my next video, which will be about penmanship and cursive, because it's something that's been on my list for some time. I got feedback last time to remove the chat box from the stream. I'm not sure whether to leave it up, or for the moment I'm going to leave you up here in the corner. I can always refer back to later. But yeah, people who are tuning into the stream probably are viewers of the channel, so they know what to expect. But this has been on my list for some time to do something about cursive. What should we say first? Cursive and handwriting in general is kind of an interesting subject. Hey, the Internet Archive is in my neighborhood in San Francisco, says Christina. The Internet Archive is wonderful. I think it's, yeah, definitely if you are in the mood to donate to something, donate to the Internet Archive because they're awesome. So much good stuff, and we're going to dive into some of it. But I wanted to give you guys some background on what we're talking about. Been thinking about doing a video about cursive and handwriting for probably more than a year, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years. And I kind of started doing some diving into it. And there was all those kind of like panic articles about the death of cursive and Gen Z can't read cursive, Gen Z, Gen Z. Especially in the Atlantic, there was that article a while ago, maybe a year ago or more now, which was one of the reasons I looked into it. And I even talked to a wonderful woman who, Dr. Rosemary Sassoon, who is 93, I believe now, and she wrote a book about 20th century handwriting, the history of 20th century handwriting. And I think I got a bit of a scope of what I want to look at. I mentioned at the end of my last stream too this amazing project called Primarium, which is put together by these type designers looking at the handwriting models used around the world to teach handwriting to children. So that was another kind of not needle in the haystack, another straw on the camel's back that finally made me decide I was going to do something on this. And I've been hashing out a way to talk about such a dense topic from a designer's perspective without kind of getting too deep into all of the adjacent topics, because it's such a huge area in terms of touching human history and writing and all that kind of stuff. But I want to kind of look at it purely from a designer / letterer perspective. I thought the best way would actually just be comparing some primary sources. So the way I'm thinking about the video now is kind of to compare the US and the UK, the American and the British approaches to handwriting, to cursive, or by looking at some of the historical documents that really lay the foundation of how it's taught in the two different places and comparing them. And yeah, so that's kind of the idea. This stream, I'm kind of just going to go deep into some of those documents and just make some notes, just kind of talk out loud through some of the observations and see if, yeah, anything comes up in the chat, people notice, that's going to be good. I'm just going to actually, speaking of which, do I know how to cut a quill? I do not know. I have pretty terrible handwriting, actually. The thumbnail for this stream, it looks kind of like my handwriting. I kind of do chicken scratch, all caps. It's not good. I made a whole range of design products for better part of a decade called Calligraphuck, which was kind of lettering in a calligraphic style based on copperplate calligraphy. And I think sign writers and lettering artists often have this way. Your handwriting looks absolutely nothing like the lettering artwork that you make. So I kind of also want to try and somehow touch on that in the video, because calligraphy is art. It's not really writing. What would I say? Calligraphy is the art of beautiful writing, which is different from having beautiful handwriting. But the line is blurry the further you go back a little bit. So we're going to look into that. And I think there's obviously the history of human writing is centuries long. And I want to focus on the 18th, not 18th, I guess most of the 19th century, the 1800s, and the 20th century. Maybe the late, yeah, sorry, did I say that right? The 1800s into the 20th century, 1900s. It's 2025. We're well into the 21st century. So, yeah, 19th and 20th century handwriting models. But I think I need to lay the groundwork when I'm comparing the US and the UK, especially. And I think I'm still playing with the title of the video, which will probably be, why does American handwriting look that way? Or why is American handwriting so weird? Because it's very different from the rest of the world. And I think in this stream, we'll try and go through some of the source documents from the US. But if you look at the US Constitution, I think I have that somewhere here. We could do that. Although I think, yeah, let's do that. Can I copy that in here? I don't want to move it. I don't want to move it. No, I don't want to move it. I want to copy that in here. Whoop. I'm clicking all kinds of ways. Let's do a little bit of diving into the Constitution. Let's put our Nicolas Cage hats on and look at this for a second. I wanted to talk about a particular letter, I think, in the video, and that's the letter G. Can we zoom in a bit closer? This is supposedly high resolution, but it's not that high resolution. Governments. Can we see governments there? Governments. This G here, and the handwriting used for the original Constitution, the engrosser, perhaps. I think I had it in my research notes, but I think there was an official, not an official engrosser at that stage, but there was a guy that was his job, who hand wrote this official copy out, which has faded with time, and this is some kind of reproduction. I think for what does it say? America's founding documents. There's this website. A high resolution stone engraving image reproduced in 1823. But you'll see that it is quite different from what the handwriting models will look like later into the 19th and 20th centuries. And I think the G in particular is like a giveaway character, because it goes through a super weird change. So I think that's going to be a one factor, one point of comparison in the video, for sure. So I wanted to start this with what handwriting model were they using when they wrote out the American Constitution, like, and on both sides of the Atlantic, it was roundhand, English roundhand or copperplate calligraphy, I guess. And the most famous kind of published work on this is the Universal Penman by George Bickham, or published by George Bickham, I think. Written and engraved. And it's got this amazing, this was published 1741. Can we get let's do a bit of a zoom in on this one. Yeah. You can see in the title here, the long S in Universal. So that's something also you find in the older sources is you keep thinking you're seeing Fs. It's not. This is the old school long S. And it has a fantastically, excuse me, old-fashioned subtitle that is like a whole paragraph long. So, the Universal Penman, or the art of writing made useful to the gentleman and scholar, as well as the man of business, exemplified in all the useful and ornamental branches of modern penmanship, with some necessary observations on the excellency of the pen and a large number of select sentences in prose and verse, various forms of business relating to merchandise and trade, letters on several occasions, accurate specimens of the Oriental languages and alphabets in all the hands non-practiced. Which is just... they don't write subtitles like they used to, but I feel like this is like the 1700s equivalent of like SEO keyword stuffing. It's just, it amuses me that they went on just endlessly. But George Bickham, there is also a good, fairly well-known script font called Bickham, named after him. And as an example of, I believe that one's an English roundhand. It would be very ironic if it wasn't. So this is the kind of model that was contemporary to the writing of the American Constitution. BP, you're not having a bad trip. This is kind of the nerdy, esoteric stuff that I do on this channel. Although normally this is research, so I'm just waffling. Whereas I'll be distilling this down into a very, I'm thinking it'd probably be like a 15, 20-minute video essay at the end. But I always think that, and it ends up being longer. But one of the reasons why it was called copperplate, I think, is that, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I always have time to go back and properly do the research notes, is that copperplate printing was a contemporary kind of print innovation at the time, like engraving into copper plates, and that allowed fine line work to be done. Which, yeah, I mean, there's a whole technological angle on it as well. When I spoke to Rosemary Sassoon, she talked about how the fountain pen and the quill really kind of influenced the forms of continuous cursive, because you couldn't easily lift the pen and put it up, take it off the paper and put it back down, because each stroke you get ink blotting. And I think there's some validity to that argument. And then also the printing method kind of allowed this. It's very interesting. Like I'll pull out some other kind of tangential sources to look at, but like penmanship was just kind of this is always when it gets when you kind of have an idea of a video, is trimming down the ideas, because there's so many different kind of weird tangents. Like there's a whole thing about like class signifier by how bad a nobleman's handwriting was, because it meant that he had a secretary or someone who was assigned to do that for him, and he could kind of have the luxury of having chicken scratch. But like it was a very time consuming thing. And then there were like the craftsmen who were engrossers or penmen. But it was this like whole book is just like a flex book of like samples of like the leading penmen of the time and kind of their show off pieces. It's less like of an instruction manual than some of the other documents. And it is, why is the page written in different fonts? They're not fonts because they're not type. I don't think these are actually handwriting in different styles. And some are using broad nib, and obviously extremely flourished, with all this flourishing around. It was a way of kind of giving, headlines. This is an extremely ornamental book. So as I kind of said, it was like a way these were like showpieces for them to flex their technical prowess, the people who were producing these pieces in this book. Let's actually go to the thumbnail view. But there is here's like an actual example that was maybe useful as a reference. So yeah, it's kind of compiled by George Bickham. Not every example in this text is by Bickham. This one is by Willington Clark. That's a really funky R, if that's an R. I assume it must be an R. It's not Clack. Of Christchurch, Southwark. Word art. Good to see you. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the French that you're talking about, but there is I think that there's a number of different, like if you go down here into the this and go into penmanship, there are like lots of Italian, French, and other language texts on these, and I'm sure there's some amazing ones in there, but I'm just trying not to stumble into too many areas I can't really talk to, so I'm trying to stick to English today. But there's some amazing kind of even some variety shown, obviously, in this example already. So you have the B is always open, but then there's a looped and a non-looped B. The X there with the loops as well, with and without. And the R, obviously those are 3 R's in a row. That's an R, that's an R, that's an R. Not, but all like pretty readable. I think probably the one that's hardest to see is, there we go, STUVW. Like, what is going on here? Because that is pretty difficult to see that that's a W there. I'm guessing the first kind of bowl in the W is looking like an N. And the Y with no curve on them is pretty funky as well. That is quite weird. But then we have in the capitals, it looks pretty, and that G is very, very much that standard G we saw in the American Constitution, that style of G. French influence on culture. Yeah. I think because I mean the Constitution is an interesting time point. Like the founding of the Americas it is still English culture in a way in the colonies very early on. And then I'm looking at these texts written later on that really separate out American penmanship and the American model as being distinctly different later on. So they have to find like a starting point that's common. That one's one of the more useful pages with just a straight up sample, but a lot of these are like very, so like this, here's a page of flourishing by George Bickham himself. Can we rotate this within the archive? I don't think that we can. Visual adjustments, can we? We don't. Unfortunately, it's a shame they can't rotate that. But do they actually give any? There's advice, education. Let's read some of these parts because children like tender. I'm not familiar with that. Osiers take the bon, and as they first are fashioned, always grow. For what we learn in youth, that alone in age we are by second nature prone. And there's that distinctive W. So this is going to be, they're going to be waxing lyrical about education in general. That's not really going to be a... These are not really like a manual on how to write well. What you won't see in this book is like, I don't think there's anything about posture, about tools, like different kinds of ink, pens or quills, what degree angle to write at. This is all extremely prescriptive in the later texts, but in this one, no. And I'm not sure, this was fairly famous in terms of these texts. There may have been another influential, more kind of prescriptive manual. But if anyone in the chat knows, then let me know if there's a manual that is contemporary to the, mid 1700s that is more directly comparable. But I mean, this is fairly, right? Script. So there's Clark again. So that previously must have been an R as well. Seek you to train each caution, every care employ, and ere you venture to confide, let his preceptor's heart be tried. Weigh well his manners, life, and scope. On these depend thy future hope. It's very, yeah. What is it? It's not very like grounded. It's not very down to earth advice. Yeah, that V is, yeah, interesting. They get, okay, so it's like just waxing on anything. The penman's advice. Do we have anything actually about writing itself? No, it's just more poetry. And some ugly babies. They love an ugly baby in these engravings. Two young ladies. So it's mostly little showpieces of poetry and crazy ornamental pieces like this. This is just, I mean, it's very skillful. It is, but not really similar to what comes later. And I think then they said they had in the appendix, and this is like 400 pages long of just very, very tedious poetry, but amazing penmanship, amazing lettering, but advice to tradesmen, blah, blah, blah. I think we get to the end. Do we have any more comparative alphabets like pages here? Specimens. Here we go. This is kind of one. So, of the running hand from the performances of the best masters. Okay. So something that we do see here is the way that they join some of these. Oh, is that that's the limit of the resolution of this scan, unfortunately. But I don't know if you can see the P's and Q's. Is that, oh, the chat, I can see the chat, but the chat box has not updated. So maybe I'll remove the chat box from the stream, and you can just check that in. I'm gonna remove this widget. Can I hide it so I can turn it on later again? I'll just remove it. That's fine. It's a bit distracting that it's frozen there, but yeah, if you have joined the stream, what am I waffling on about? We're looking at some penmanship manuals tonight from the old masters. Looking first at this example of English roundhand or copperplate calligraphy as a baseline, and then looking at some American, yeah, I guess, what are they? I would almost say cult leaders. They're very like Philip Seymour Hoffman in The Master. They're very strident in their beliefs about what good writing is. But they did change, not the world, but they did change the course of American cursive. But what was I was pointing here a little bit at how deep these kind of letter forms go in terms of connecting, especially how the Q kind of goes all the way down, very long descender up to the Q, to the R, sorry. Same with the Y to the Z or Z there. This is kind of a style that definitely disappears later on. But yeah, for the most part, actually, if you deal with, calligraphy and scripts and things like that, this is not that difficult to read. I think it's pretty legible. That letter forms haven't changed that much since 1739, so that's what, almost 300 years. I think the biggest, most jarring one, obviously, is the long S, right? Business. The first S is always a long S, and then the short S is the second one. I can't remember the exact rules of when an S is long. A long S is used, and that's a bit weird. The running hand looks almost like a B there, but let's zoom back out and get to some other pages. I do like that they, in that extremely long subtitle, they talked about having all of the Oriental alphabets as well, which I think is just like some Arabic and Hebrew. There we go, and Greek. Greek as well. So at the very end, they've thrown in some alphabets around the world for yeah. Oh, actually, that's the previous page where he says the Oriental languages. Introduction. Okay, well, that's going to be. I'm sure it's going to be very enlightening. But I like that they've kind of separated out Hebrew and rabbinical. Probably very, like, 300-year-old writing, probably very archaic terms for some of these. I like Arabic with a K too. I don't know the story about the history of the long S that deeply. I don't know why it disappeared. I mean, the most famous thing that you learn about the long S is that the German character SZ, which looks kind of like a beta or a capital B that you see in like words like Strasse, is based on the long S with a Z kind of conjoined. It's a ligature of a long S and a Z. That's why it's the SZ. But I don't know why it disappeared. Probably for practical reasons. It's just why it slows you down to kind of, it's very confusing because it looks so close to an F. But maybe that's actually not the reason why it disappeared. Somebody, maybe there's someone in the chat. I know there's definitely other people out there, but I don't, maybe anyone tonight who knows the true reason why. I like they've included Greek, but they have also German text. So Gothic was, yeah, there were definitely different calligraphic and square text. What's the difference? We have very ornamental capitals, but you can see actually. I mean, one of the comments that has been left on one of the videos that I made was about the history of the chop suey font, the fake Chinese font, or the Chinese restaurant font. And in that, we have a little animated explainer about stroke order in Chinese characters in Hanzi. Yeah, but and I didn't do a very good example visually of the fact that there is no prescribed stroke order for the Latin alphabet. I think he used a capital E, which was not the best. But I think here is a really good example. Is like there's no canonical writing system for the English alphabet. Round text, which is the kind of main style that's used throughout for the longer text. S here is kind of, depending on how you count, one stroke, kind of go up and then down there. But then with a broad pen, I mean, this is an S and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 strokes. I'm not sure actually which way they go, clockwise or not. And I think this S is 1, 2, 3, 4 strokes as well, in a completely different shape and order. But they're both S. Same with the A, with a broad nibbed pen. That is 1, 2, 3, 4 strokes for an A, and it's 2 strokes for an A in Roundhand. I just didn't have time to dive into that in the middle of a video about a different topic, but maybe I'll make a short about that. There is no canonical, even number of strokes for a letter in the Latin alphabet, depending on the style of handwriting or calligraphy that you are using. But anyway, this is the first of the primary texts that I want to look at in the video. Is this The Universal Penman by George Bickham. Crazy long, extremely. What's a nice way of saying like bloviating? It's not a bloviating windbag. No, it's. I mean, it's just what is it trying to achieve? It's not trying to teach you how to write. It's kind of like flexing of like, look at the amazing penmanship we have, the best penman of England. Like, you know, yeah. And I think there's we'll definitely come back to like the flexing in penmanship. Yeah, verbose. I mean, but it's also kind of like how much of that is just the fashion of the time, the style of the time. I mean, those long paragraph long subtitles are very of that time. But yeah, it feels like very little substance in terms of, you know, the words are beautiful, but it's full of just like the most trite prose. I guess all those kind of like old Olmecs and stuff like that are just like terribly insufferable when you read them. I have like, listen to my words of wisdom that I've made rhyme. But yeah, beautiful writing, very, very readable still, and not that difficult to read. But this, I mean, what do I want to talk about with this? It was quite labor intensive. You had to be very precise. One of the things we haven't talked about a little bit yet that I think has to be mentioned is the variable stroke weight. Can we get, yeah, maybe this one. Custom. The thing about this style of calligraphy is that you need to have excellent pen control to create that thin and thick, or they're not really thick, but just the kind of more stronger lines, and then the kind of very fine lines was done with a flexible nib. So you would press more firmly so that the kind of tip of the nib would split open and then create this kind of channel for the ink to fill to make the thick lines, and then they would kind of come back together again to make the really thin, fine lines. So you kind of have to kind of constantly change how much pressure you're applying to the pen to make it create these kinds of really exquisite lines. And later on, you'll see that it's disposed of for expediency, for convenience, really. That who has time to do that? As the world kind of, especially the American models, are made for business and commerce, and I think it's Palmer who really kind of ditches this idea. But it was extremely important to have that extremely fine control over that. And you can like even see the quality of this writing compared to the stuff that's from the Constitution. The Constitution is much less refined than this, but this was, this was like the showcase of these craftsmen, the best craftsmen in the country, or at the time. And the Constitution was not; it was a political document, not a craftsman's flex piece. So it's kind of interesting. Look at that F, the join on the F from the T. That's, yeah. I know. The thing, I kind of forgot about the W. The W is quite strikingly different. Before we move on to the next book, let me catch up on some of the comments in the chat. People have talked about, did my sound cut out? No, okay, it came back. I'm sorry if there's any technical difficulties. I inevitably something goes wrong with these streams. I don't stream often enough to actually get much better at it in between streams, so I apologize for that. Yeah, there was someone, Davina brought up that thing about the pen itself before I was talking about it. So thanks for shouting that out. Caitlin, nice to see you in the chat. Flamboyant, that's a good word. Mont, we have the long S was a form in Caroline script and all minuscule scripts until the 1100s. Okay, yes, there's quite a lot. I mean, this is the thing about there is so much history to kind of get sidetracked by when doing any video about handwriting, and so it needs to be razor sharp what the focus is. So that's the framing is, let's kind of dive in. I think on this one I probably only have a chance to maybe talk for a minute or two about this document and pull out some examples just to say this is where both the US and the UK were kind of drawing their model of writing from around the founding of the United States. And then that gives us a frame of reference for when we look at the next thing, which is the Spencerian style that came up. Platt Rogers Spencer is the first kind of figure who gives an alternative model that really takes off in America. And we can look at that a little bit here. So this is So we're jumping forward quite a bit. This is like 1870s. A lot of these ones that I'm going to look at are kind of all in the 1800s, from the mid to late 1800s. Are the American examples. And I think Spencer, he doesn't actually publish his stuff until his sons publish it after he dies. So it is very differently as a document. It's just very different. The thing is that there are a few different ones. I think I bookmarked this one because this was the one that was published first. Then there's some amazing. Does it have here? I love this. Here is a preface. Parents, teachers, and lovers of the art of writing, we submit this little volume to you and to the public generally, asking indulgence for its errors and a generous consideration of its merits. Which I think all... I mean, I wish all my videos could start with that, of like asking for indulgence of the errors. Instead, I just have to block certain keywords when people leave the same correction 100 times. But I mean, it's nice to see that it's been an eternal problem, or seemingly eternal, at least since the 1800s. So unfortunately, I don't know why on this particular one I can't see the thumbnail view and stuff like that, but maybe it's something that the contributor can turn on or off. And this specimen comes from the Letterform Archive, which is an amazing non-profit institution with a huge treasure trove of amazing documents. So yeah, if you are interested in this kind of nerdy stuff, have to recommend them. But we are losing something here. But the structure of this document, the previous one, the Universal Penman, was just like straight up, like full of just poetry done in immaculate penmanship, preserved as like this kind of flex. And this is definitely a manual on how to write. So okay, so there's an amazing little side. I just noticed there's an amazing little side discussion between Davina and Caitlin in the chat. I won't get distracted. You guys just keep going. That's great. But this is like definitely a didactic document about how one should write. There's a lot about sitting position, and I think it opens with like, I mean, apart from a little bit about the man himself, is this talking about how to produce the ink. Good ink is sometimes made by mixing different kinds of, what is this, ammonia, a few drops of ammonia. Okay. The young man whose early history is thus briefly told was Platt R. Spencer, the originator and author of the Spencerian. Okay, there's something missing. There is also, I feel like there's a doubling up. So that's page 22. That's page 9. Something's wrong with this particular one. So maybe I can find a different version of this one. Spencerian key. Spencerian key. Let me search if I can find it. Spencerian key. Okay, there's a few copies of it. That's the one from that's the Letterform Archive one. This one is from Cornell University. So I don't think the resolution is as high, but I think hopefully it's more. And there he is. I mean, there's so many of these like very intense looking bearded old Victorian men. Victorian? I don't know. If that's the right era. But like really intense bearded white guys. And they have extremely strong opinions about, the uh, the effect of good writing on one's moral character and all this kind of stuff. It's very of its time. I mean, there's a great book kind of. There's a couple of books that I've read around this topic. One is like is it called The History and the Uncertain Future of Handwriting? And that's sort of like an American book, so it's focused a little bit more on this, but it kind of talked about the idea of the, what are they called? The transcendentalist movement in the US. And this was like the same era as, John Harvey Kellogg was like trying to feed people bland grains to get them to stop touching themselves. And David Henry Thoreau was off, cosplaying as someone in the wilderness while getting his mother to do his laundry, that kind of stuff. But there is like this, and there's kind of this kind of folk backstory to this guy, that he developed this style of writing when he was 12 years old or something, inspired by the forms of nature around him. And it's very American in that kind of, he's a very idealistic figurehead for writing reform, Spencer. But let's, a theory of penmanship. Here we go. Okay, cool. Okay, it is a little bit too long-winded to read huge chunks out of. So, with wise intent, the hand of nature on peculiar minds imprints a different bias. Yeah, I mean, there's this kind of, the philosophical side is definitely talking about the nature and natural power and stuff like that, about the inspiration behind it. But then it gets it does get very grounded. It is not as lofty. I think lofty was maybe the word that I was looking for with the previous one. It's not as lofty with, writing little, bits of prose about, how one should raise a child or whatever. It's focusing on materials and implements, what kind of ink and blotting paper, book covers. It gets really in the weeds. Pens. What kind of pen shall we use? Okay, steel pens produce the most perfect lines. In the selection of a steel pen, the shape, point, flexibility, and quality of metal are to be considered. It should be of the finest metal, well finished, of medium size, with smooth and moderately fine points, and of a good degree of flexibility. So we didn't get any of that in the previous one. And here we even say, mold is generated only when the temperature of the room or place in which it is kept rises over 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, talking about keeping ink from spoiling. I mean, it's very, very technical. And also even about how to kind of set up the blackboard for the teaching. The inch in height of chairs. I mean, it gets really down into it. And they were very strong on the position. I think there's a big kind of split about, where should the movement come from, the hand or from the elbow, from the shoulder, when writing. And I think that they kind of, if I recall correctly, Spencer was not so, emphasizing movement from the elbow and shoulder, but the people who followed him definitely thought, oh no, this is bad, it leads to hand cramping and all kinds of things. The finger holds. Okay, well, I want to have the thumbnail view because there's a bunch of blank pages, and then we kind of get onto the actual exercises. The Spencerian medium hand. But I think, that was why I think I wanted to have both. So one thing that really changes in Spencer's model compared to Roundhand, I mean, it's kind of a giveaway in the name Roundhand, but it was really based off the circles, or ovals, actually, to be more accurate. It was very oval based, whereas the actual forms in Spencerian are a little bit more pinched off, perhaps more teardrop shaped in some ways, or there's more variety of shapes in certain ways. But I mean, he gets really down into the troubleshooting of different forms. But I don't think that this particular scan copy is great with these examples. I think the other one from the letterform archive was better. So even though it's busted, and why is it? Oh, that's annoying. Maybe can I actually go straight to the letterform archive? Okay. Itself to find it. Perhaps that would be better. Spencerian key to practical penmanship. Here we go. And this is just somebody drew in this copy. Okay, here we go. This is better. Oh, okay. It's not. So, I mean, it's quite different in how these are the capitals. We're starting to see there's the G. So before, the G, kind of like a C, was sitting on the same shared baseline, and then the kind of descender goes below the baseline and scoops back up. But Spencer kind of makes the descender, for lack of a better word, I'm going to have to look up the proper anatomy for the writing to describe this, but like it sits, what was previously under the baseline is now sitting on the baseline, and the whole shape is shifted up, and then you'll see it mutate in the handwriting models later from there. But like there's a lot of different variations that he shows here. It's still that flexible nib, so there's like the stroke contrast, and interesting to see, like with a C, sometimes it's shown an example where the thick stroke is here on the outside edge of the C, and then one with the inside. I don't know if these are variety of Spencerian capitals. I think there are a couple of other ones that are quite distinctively different from Roundhand. I mean, that R is crazy. That R is insane. It's like got encephalitis or something, that R. It is, but I mean, I don't think that's the canonical one. There are some really bizarre variations on this page. But when you see the effect overall of this, here we go. It's much sharper. It's much more, kind of teardropped, pinched in a lot of the lowercase. The M, the A, the U, there's just like a much more angular sharpness to it. And you don't see as much stroke variation in the lowercase. It's kind of mostly reserved for the uppercase, and then the kind of ascenders and descenders with the T's, P's, D's, but it's streamlining a little bit. Quite different from the English Roundhand. And when I'm actually, creating the actual final video, I think there's going to be a lot of visual side-by-sides that make this much clearer. But the contrasts are there. It's much more prescriptive. and grounded in reality. And I think there's also, drills for, do these loops, do hundreds and hundreds of these loops to kind of train your hands how to do these shapes, and these particular hand movements, etc. And the Spencer, I missed that at the top. Spencerian lady's hand. So some good old 1800s, 19th century sexism. I'm sure there is a lot of problematic reasons why there's a separate lady's hand. Interesting. I wonder if, my guess would be also that there's less thick lines in this, also because it's more dainty. That's a guess. Hazarding a guess there. I don't. They should have any of. Has this particular set of examples got it? Yeah. So like here's like one of these very direct kind of step-by-step things about the particular shapes he wants you to make. Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at this guy, right? Look at this guy's picture, and he has developed a hand script for ladies. I mean, is it wrong to presume about people from the 1870s what they would be writing? Maybe it's wrong, but I'm sure I'm actually not that off base. Right. So that was one, but there was. I think the first thing that his sons published was called that, the Spencerian Key. And then this came later. I think this one is, his model becomes extremely popular. Oh yeah, and this was pulled out into in the book about the history and uncertain future of handwriting, about this kind of like transcendentalist kind of inspiration behind this handwriting model. Was like he was inspired by shapes on Lake Erie, right? Evolved mid nature's unpruned scenes on Erie's wild and woody shore, the rolling wave, the dancing stream, the wild rose haunts in days of yore. I mean, there's still a little bit of a touch of what Bickham was doing with these bits of, highfalutin prose, although it's just typed here, which is kind of ironic. I think this is meant to depict him as a child writing on the sands of Lake Erie to a very impressed young woman, of course. So he is a very quirky character, and his like choices. Here we go. So this is his own writing, I guess. I mean, it gets much tighter. You can see here, I think you kind of see an example of just like how different this is. It's kind of much more exaggerated. Like in type design, we talk about the X height, right? And cap height. But just like thinking about the white space, and how tightly compacted this is. It's kind of condensed, compared with this Roundhand. It feels round. And this is even a more maybe condensed proportion. Oh, I pressed some other button, but yeah. So comparing this with this, quite different, I think. I think it's pretty visually apparent. Interested to see if the chat agrees. I mean, I don't know if this is easier to follow. I think this is just like an example of his. It's not how he's instructing people to write. It's his personal writing, but it's very idiosyncratic. I mean, it's in its own way extremely pleasing in its very regular rhythm, but actually quite a bit harder to read compared to the English Roundhand. Someone asked, what is the aim of this research stream? So I should do a bit of a reset. This is a stream where I'm just kind of blathering and making observations, going through some of these primary sources on handwriting manuals, because I'm going to, at some point in the new year, create a video about handwriting and why the American style of cursive is very distinct from other countries, and comparing, especially just as a point of comparison, the US and the UK, and what primary sources in terms of influential texts shaped the trajectory of handwriting education in those two places. And then I'll point towards, at the end of the video, this project called Primarium, which is an amazing kind of resource to see globally all the different kind of handwriting models for the Latin alphabet. Not, entirely comprehensive, but like 40 countries, I think. And you can see the influence of different factors on it. But I mean, it's such a huge, dense topic. It's kind of narrowing it down. And I think the big stroke, big picture reason for the differences is that the American cursive style was kind of set in the 1800s by guys like Spencer and some of the people who followed, and they founded this very particular style of cursive that was for business, for commerce, and it was the age of written correspondence. It was kind of the typewriter was kind of being invented around that time, but wasn't yet common. They needed a really efficient way to write. And these kind of penmanship schools, it became a very technical craft, whereas the British education system was more influenced later. They kind of continued with the English Roundhand for a long time, and then there was a big movement towards Italic revival, which is going back to Renaissance Italian handwriting, and then the influence of much more child-centric learning, and thinking about the motor skill development of young children. And it was much more focused on child-centric model. I'm going to look at how that happened between like the 1920s to the 1990s in the UK. Yeah, so I think that will hopefully be, that's extremely nerdy, as someone's pointed out. But I hope that this will be a really interesting journey to take people on. And I mean, the streams are fun just because a random group of nerds will tune in and watch me just spout out about some of these interesting manuals. And because I won't be able to go into all of this detail in the final video. But yeah, this one, I have to talk a little bit about the birds, because the birds, you'll see, I have to have like an aside or a short or something about birds, maybe a bonus video, but like, you'll see that, like, what do I compare it to? Latte art. My knowledge of specialty coffee is not like James Hoffman level at all, and my knowledge is pretty outdated. But latte art is, you'll see like there's a few kind of standard patterns that are poured. It's about like pouring like a rosette, is it a rosette on the top of your coffee with milk foam. Started as a way of like flourishing, the barista. they could only do that latte art if they had the perfect, milk microfoam. If they had just boiled the crap out of the milk on the steam wand, they would not be able to pour that latte art. So then latte art has got more and more elaborate over time. I think you have like chasing rosettes, and I mean, this is definitely outdated. I'm sure there's much like World Barista Championships. They're probably doing other crazy stuff, but it was like the kind of artistic flourish was there, but it was kind of like the signifier that the technical skill of the barista was on point. And the same thing with these like flourishing things, these birds and stuff. It was just like a way of just like showing off that these penmen had just like perfect quill control or pen control, that they could make all of these perfectly controlled lines of the perfect thicknesses, and kind of have the lines be parallel or however they wanted to make these compositions, and to kind of be able to control the amount of ink so it wouldn't run out in the middle of these long strokes and stuff like that. It was a kind of that, there's a kind of through line between those two, and not even like, even visually, I think. And you'll see they come up time and time again. It's usually like birds and like floral motifs. And this is like one of those birds as well. But I think you even see them on the corners of some documents, like government documents and things like that from around that time. And here you can have another example of like the actual script, how different it's become, even with this first guy, this first version, of how different this is from this. Like the way that descenders are handled, the kind of Y in day, thy, and even the T like isn't crossed. It's not, the T isn't crossed, it's kind of like drawn, and then the crossbar kind of floats over it. So that's thy, and the kind of crossbar has just kind of crossed through the loop in the H. And the A there in at starts with this kind of low connecting line that doesn't connect with anything. But you see that there's always that kind of entry stroke to all these characters. The camera is here. The entry stroke into some of these characters, even though they're not, there's no preceding character to kind of enter from, adds to the visual rhythm of this style of writing. It's, and I believe that is not something that you see here. Like this A doesn't, in and, does not start with an entry stroke into that A. So, I mean, it's very, it is definitely a step backwards in terms of legibility, I think. I mean, these are really striking. And there's a reason why a lot of people are a fan of this for like wedding invitation, that kind of thing, still to this day. But it also had once you learn how to read it, it's actually pretty legible, but it's actually, it has a lot of stylistic flourishes to it. And that is what the people who come after Spencer kind of trim from his system. They make it a little bit more streamlined. So yeah, I think, is that all I want to say about Spencer's stuff? I mean, this is a much more comprehensive new compendium of penmanship. So, I mean, it was, what else do I want to say? I mean, this era, this like mid to late 1800s was just like the golden age of penmanship in some ways. It was just so, Yeah, it's almost like Hollywood has those like golden ages. You know, even like think about like 1970s Hollywood new was it Hollywood New Wave or whatever with Martin Scorsese and a bunch of these people, um, because of different factors. I just think that yeah, penmanship had this moment, especially in America around this time, and I think things like the flourishes, the systems of flourishes and elaborate things are just a sign of that. It says, so that says that's an extremely difficult to read headline, but it says elements of flourishing. The E, the LE. Wow. With a drop shadow and these really exaggerated little. That's, yeah. We're a world away from like extremely boring, legible sans serifs that we have today on the web. But really different and really cool, I think. I'm glad to see that Davina and Caitlin are still chatting in the chat. Was there any other thing? I'm going to have a quick review of the chat before we look at the next chap who follows. It's which is Palmer. I wonder if that one has this comparison between his system and the others. But it's gorgeous. Yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of the interesting thing to me about the topic of handwriting on YouTube in terms of actually I'm going to look at their camera for this bit. The interesting thing about the topic of handwriting on YouTube is that when you search for it, it tends to either be people giving instruction on how to improve your handwriting, and they don't often tell you what model they are showing you, or there's like graphology, which is like personality trait reading in handwriting, which is like astrology, not really scientific. And it's an interesting kind of space because there's not that many kind of like explainer type videos on it. I think because it's really daunting. Like this video has been on my to-do list for over a year because I had a chat with this very impressive Dr. Rosemary Sassoon, and like it just kind of opened my mind to just the breadth of the topic. And that kind of made me kind of go, okay, I'm going to put a cork in that one and let it stew. And then I think that there's a great talk actually on, I think, Letterform Archive or Cooper Union by the guys who put together this Primarium project. You can search it out, but they talk about their project, and I kind of had an overview of the continuum of different models for handwriting. And that just got me thinking about like how did we end up with the models that are taught in different countries? So I hope I'm heading in the right direction with this research in this video. We'll see how easy it is to actually finish writing it. But yeah, I think these handwriting manuals are filled with really interesting stuff. So let's keep going. We've got the Palmer method. So Palmer here is this particular publication is from 1915, but I think that his stuff actually is also 1800s. This one's published 1915, but it's yeah, I'm sure that maybe the book itself actually talks about the origin of it, method of business writing. So this guy comes after Spencer, and he really clothing for the right forearm. This guy, I think one of his main gripes with Spencer is like he wants to have a way of making writing more efficient for business. And one of the big things is like if you've ever had to do like a written exam, like writing long form an essay in an exam, like your hand will cramp up. And his kind of idea was that you had to like move the whole arm from the elbow and not just like from the wrist. And there's a lot of like this muscular movement discussed in his books. Like this is also like quite interesting. The these are school children, but I think there were also some of penmanship schools as well for business. Physical training in penmanship practice, correct posture, relaxing exercises, movement practice, and pen holding. Like it was very, very like didactic about hold the pen in the right way, sit in the right position, the paper should be at the exact right angle. So yeah, look at this. These illustrations are great. Yeah, this is the angle that the page should be held at. These diagrams are intended to show clearly the position of the writing paper on the desk, the relative positions of the arms. Number 26 is the half side position, mostly used in public schools and best adapted to them because of the character of the desks. Number 27 is the square front position. I mean, and then this is also like a little bit more specifically focused on drills than the book by Spencer. Counting to regulate motion and speed. So like moving that pen up and down, making circles, making straight lines, and they're very prescriptive on slant. But here you can kind of see we're getting more space between the letters in a little bit. It feels a little bit wider, to use a typographic term. It feels a wider tract. There's more space between them. But it feels definitely related. Yeah. And one thing I think that's interesting here, I don't know, did I compared to, where is this? That's, oh, this is for science, but this is angular hand. Spencer's A versus Palmer's A. We lose the capital A. That's H. I wish there was I need to get just like one. Yeah. Okay. A, Atlanta. That A, very ornamental, very, very beautiful, but also the G, D, all of these, compared to Palmer, that A is just like a straight, big, lowercase a, scaled up. And here we get the G that I'm talking about, that is the weird American G. The G is sitting flat on the same baseline, and what used to be a descender going down below the baseline has now kind of formed this bottom half. So it's a very strange thing when the first time as a non-American seeing the American G written like that. It's weird. But it looks like a wall of Christmas lights. But yeah, it gets into the drills. These are quite funny. M's. We can get into some actual further examples where it's actual full text to get more of a character of it. But it is, here we go, some actual sentences. I mean, I think it actually is a little bit easier to read than Spencer. because it's simplified. I mean, it's simplified not only in the shape of the letters themselves, but there's more space between them. They're a little less tight. And also, I don't know if the removal of the kind of line thickness variation is actually making it easier to read or not. But it was definitely easier to write because you didn't have to master that. So that is, he was very much kind of trying to make a business forward style of writing. But there are still some, a lot of signs of its adaptation from Spencerian. Much more related to Spencerian than to copperplate, I feel, anyway. So this is Palmer. And then the guys who follow him are Zaner and Bloser. And they are the ones who basically carry into the 20th century this model because they are still producing materials today. They're still, I think they've been bought up by a big publishing concern, but they they published this magazine for many, there's like decades of this editorial or journal, which was, I think, I don't know, was it always called the Business Educator? What did it start with? But like, this is an issue from 1930s. The Penmanship, Engrossing, and Business Education. And here's that bird again. Put a bird on it. Out of Columbus, Ohio. So, I mean, you can still see that that is straight kind of Spencerian style almost in a way. But their model for teaching handwriting is a little bit further simplified. And they are also talking a lot about arm movement and arm position. They get so far as to get a skeleton. So I think, yeah, Zaner was like the guy who started this company. And then he died in an early automobile accident or something. Or was it like he got hit by I think it was an automobile accident. And then his business partner, Bloser, kind of took over it. And then it became like the franchised, this publishing, powerhouse in the American education system. And it became the dominant handwriting model taught in as far as cursive styles went for a long time. Can we zoom in and get a good view of that skeleton? The arm movement method of rapid writing. And that, again, talking like fulcrums and exactly what the position. Penmanship psychology. Oh yeah, there's a paper position. Right? Very, very prescriptive. But their alphabet is very similar to the Palmer alphabet. I think there are a couple of small differences. I need to actually suss out exactly what they are. I think, is it the P? Okay, the P is simpler than the Palmer P. That's for sure. What else looks? I mean, but it keeps that their G. Well, their G is a little bit simplified, but I think most people have learned that Palmer style G. This example is showing a different one, so I'm not sure if this is the full picture. That's Q. A, C, E, D, F. Or whether that came back later. Because I know it is. The thing about also the to develop nice handwriting is like it requires just so much repetition, a lot of repetition, and I think in the 1800s there wasn't that much to learn in school compared to by the end of the 20th century in terms of grading and this kind of thing. So they could definitely afford to spend more time just doing handwriting drills. Maybe that's a very dismissive statement. Okay, this K, S. What is about the G? But this is the old. This is one of the older versions. Oh, and then they get some more additional alphabets at the end. But let's. I think I found a. This is from the 1987. This is so I have to borrow this one from the archive. But this is the same system, but fast forward about, when was that original one published? 1904 to 1987, so forward about 80 years. And how has the handwriting model changed? Not that much. And there's the G. I was talking about the weird G, the weird capital G is there. And the T is also kind of weird. Disconnected capital T. They've added this curl there that I don't think was, definitely not in the earlier one. But it is, yeah, that little curl was not there. It's definitely not in Palmer's. Oh, no, it's kind of there. The T, the U, this little curl, the T and the F. Oh, the T and F are very difficult to separate from each other. I don't like that. That's just personal. There's definitely going to be some personal preference in there. But yeah, basically for 80 years, not that much changed in terms of those. Now, italic handwriting that got massively more popular in the UK did show up in the US in the 1960s, I think, 60s or 70s, quite late in the game when this already had quite a foothold. But they didn't import it from the UK. They had their own separate italic revival handwriting model, which is quite weird. It's Danielian or something very, yeah, it's like the naming is really stupid, but and that's slightly different, but I think it still retains some of the quirks of these cursive models, if I remember correctly. But what is interesting about this is that, like, some of these letter shapes, oh yeah, that's another one of those quirks of these, is that this M with its kind of, the first hump is always taller than the second hump in the M, which I don't know if that dates back to Palmer as well. His M, not, yeah, it kind of slopes down a little bit, but it's it's a very, I mean, Spencerian script is kind of still very much like beautiful writing. It's still very in the world of calligraphy. And then when you get into Palmer, and especially Zaner-Bloser, it's no longer calligraphy. This is just cursive. But it's so, yeah, it's such a strangely different way of writing. I don't think I want to dive into the UK texts too much in this one, but we may look through some of these, this publication that they made from the Zaner-Bloser company, because this is the other thing, they were all like, Zaner and Bloser definitely learned the Spencerian style of calligraphy. You can see it. This is like I think the biggest irony actually is that their logo, the corporate logo, looks handwritten, but you can see what a Z or Z should look like in their handwriting system. But their corporate logo is a Z and a B, and it's not on this 1987 one, right? It's not. But their new one, lists, if we go over to here, this is from 2016, the new logo. Zaner-Bloser, ZB. That's not the Z that they teach you to write. I just think that's like a nice, I don't know, is that, I'm no Alanis Morissette, but that seems ironic to me. So yeah, the reason, part of the reason to do the stream and waffle on is there's so many different little rabbit holes to go down on this kind of stuff. But it was like, yeah, the typewriter definitely killed business correspondence in terms of like someone sitting there and handwriting out letters every day. Like some of these are kind of blending the line between like calligraphic flourish illustration and just straight up illustration. Like you can see that the loops in this wing are definitely like made with a calligraphy pen, but then the rest of the illustration is just straight up illustration. So strange. But like the cool thing about this publication, because it was published for quite a long time, it's annoying that it's not, I think actually it's somewhere in there under the University of Scranton library. There's like a collection of all of these, and I think it was published for quite a few decades. But I mean, the number of ads in this for the different kinds of like courses and think pieces about this. I mean, it also was definitely a sales tool. And there's people like, showed how big business it was, teaching people how to write. But I mean, this gives you some idea of like also what a whole page of writing looks like using these styles. It's it takes an adjustment to try to like get in the right mental space to be able to kind of just fluently read this. And these are like excellent handwriting. These are like, but I think one of the criticisms that Dr. Sassoon had when I talked to her was about like, there was this kind of weird, I mean, at least a philosophical difference amongst handwriting education people is that you should, as you mature, move away from having writing that looks exactly like the handwriting model. And it should have some personality to it in some ways. And these kind of almost look like textbook examples. But it is, interesting, I think. And these, I don't know the exact backstory to these. These sometimes you see are like these more ragged, thick lines. I don't know if it was a specific kind of pen nib that allowed them to do this, or a technique, but it's like a particular flourish. But what was I going to say? Also, these, yeah, where are these? These crazy flourished pieces almost feel like, you know, before the, especially before the invention of the typewriter, you know, almost latte art is like one comparison. Another comparison of this is almost like, you know, the demo scene. If you know anything about like the demo scene, it's these kind of programmers making these visual, like trippy visual, like executable programs in really tiny bits of code. And it's like a technical flex to make like the most impressive visuals using the smallest amount of data and stuff like that. And it kind of feels like a byproduct of like having a critical mass of nerds or specialists in a certain field, that they can kind of have a kind of internal subculture where they flex on each other in these technical feats. Like the demo scene, like this kind of like having, you know, these penmen having their publications where they like showcase their extremely detailed, like flourished birds. There's something funny about that. But yeah, I'm kind of losing a bit of steam of what I also want to say about this at the moment, because I could go deeper into comparing the UK one, but I might do that in a different stream. I will open up the Primarium project to show you guys that a little bit. But I should also check in on the chat before we dive into this, and then we'll wrap up the stream, I think. We'll probably wrap up in 20 minutes, if not sooner. What has been going on here? Caitlin and Vina have been chatting away, which looks great. And graffiti is a good, is also a good kind of example. I mean, yeah, there was like the graffiti scene, like different crews, you know, competitively showing off. Maybe there's something about that as well. That's definitely probably more relatable as an example, that like people know about graffiti competitive art form culture more than they know about the demo scene, maybe. But do these styles relate to different ways scripts were used? Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, like the simplification of these models was to kind of make them more efficient, especially for business correspondence. That some of the more nicer flourishes of Spencerian script were kind of stripped away to make it more fast to and sustainable to write for long extended periods of time. And that was like why they kind of keep hammering home about the sitting position and, you know, moving the movement coming from the elbow or whatever else, was that focus on that. And definitely, yeah, the typewriter changed a lot when that came around. But I mean, the other kind of thing that was, you know, I was trying to think of how can I tie this into this video, or is it a distraction? Because there's so many different spiraling paths out from the topic. But I love Red Dead Redemption 2, the handwritten journal that you have from your main character Arthur, well, the main playable character in Red Dead Redemption 2, Arthur Morgan, has a handwritten journal, and it's the main handwritten object, but there are so many different findable letters in the game, and the handwriting is unique for each of them, except there is like one note that you find from like in Chinatown, and it's not handwritten. It's like it's typed, which is such a cop out because they couldn't find someone to do like handwritten note in Chinese. Anyway, but it's very interesting because like sometimes like some of the characters' backstory is revealed through the style of writing. What I would have loved to like interview someone who is like an art director and rock star about the role of handwriting in the storytelling of the game, but Rockstar are just like, they don't do that. They don't ever talk to anyone about the behind the scenes stuff, which is a shame. But I'm not sure whether I'm going to include that in the video or not in the final version. Oh, thank you, Bernard and Julian. That is an amazing. Thank you very much for the donation. They ask, any opinions on football club crests? They're great at showing the evolution of visual design trends. Yes, and there's a reason why I have not talked about it. Because I don't watch football. I'm sorry, I'm not a sports guy. I don't really follow any sports, any professional sports. The Olympics, weirdly, that the Olympics was one of the topics that was a video that really blew up on my channel. But I mean, the Olympics is fun because everyone kind of gets to watch all kinds of sports that they wouldn't really normally follow. But I would love to do a video about football club crests but only as a collab with a creator who had more expertise on the area. It could be fun. I kind of think the last stream talked about maybe doing something similar to that concept again, of just reacting to the cover design of books, but with someone who's like really into like reading a lot of popular like books, and they know the stories that I'm talking about, because I had no idea going into that last stream. Maybe doing that with someone who's really who knows all the football clubs and all the, their perceptions and blah blah blah. If just my reaction to the design of the crests and bouncing off seeing their reaction could be fun, but I don't know who that creator is because I don't really follow that space. So if you have any suggestions of creators who you would like to see, I know that some stand-ups that in the circle of stand-ups I knew in London, there was one guy who had a podcast about football called The Football Ramble. But I didn't know him very well, and I haven't spoken to him in years. But if there are other, if there are other creators on YouTube specifically who talk about football kits, all that kind of stuff, then please let me know. Also, thanks, Caitlin, for it's a bloody lotus. There's been some, like, I would like to do another one of those roundup things. It's been a while since I've done a roundup video, so that one could be fun. What was it? Before I got off the topic of handwriting, there was one other thing. I was trying to. I like to have a pop culture thing to reference to get people into a topic. I think Bridget Jones's Diary. Do people still know about Bridget Jones's Diary? Do the kids know what that is? So very, very interesting, because American actress Renee Zellweger plays a British character, and she has you see the diary, the close-up inset, and it is not American cursive. It is more British italic cursive. So that's nice. And I wanted to find another movie which had American cursive in it. Okay, so the young kids don't know about Bridget Jones's Diary. Is there another movie where there is American cursive for a counterpoint? And I thought The Notebook with Ryan Reynolds. No, Ryan Gosling. Jeez. Um, Early in his career, probably also too old for the kids on TikTok to understand that reference. And I found like one shot. I didn't kind of rewatch the whole thing. I just kind of was searching, and there was a close up of, but it was a letter, not the notebook, the titular notebook from the Notebook. So I think maybe I'll just stick with using the American Constitution as a point of reference, because I think the kids on TikTok, these Gen Z audience, may at least know what that is. If there are any, yeah, because there's a lot of bad handwriting that isn't like very close to what good writing is taught to be in schools, in movies. Like there's like the burn book in Mean Girls. I'm not that familiar, but apparently that's not the kind of writing I can deconstruct on this. If you can think of any examples of pop culture, film or TV examples of writing cursive, that would be great. Yeah, I don't know, Caitlin, if that was a happy accident of the production crew or not. But let me quickly, before we end the stream, talk about this project. And this was like one of the instigating things for this this video, is that this is an amazing kind of project assembled by Type Together. And you can see, this will just give you a little bit of a hint of what I'll unpack a little bit more in a future stream. But the concept for how to teach cursive is very different. And it's kind of a progressive system. I mean, there's no like one singular model. And that's the other thing, is by nature, that it has to be simplified. The story needs to be simplified because there's like always 8 competing different models for handwriting. But one of the popular kind of ideas in teaching handwriting is a progressive model where you learn printed upright letter forms, stick and ball style letters, and then you kind of learn to add a little tail to those, and then you kind of start joining the letters. Progressive cursive, like this. And that's the Sassoon-Williams system, and that was Rosemary Sassoon that I was able to speak to in researching this topic. But yeah, this is talking a little bit about this is the printing manuscript style, and then it goes into talking a little bit about italic. But we can look at that. It shows you this is the primary and joined Sassoon model. But what's great is you can kind of look at all of these different models and highlight some of the unique features of them. Loopless ascenders, loopless F, these kind of things, and to compare it with just a different. To go to the United States. Here, you can see that they talk a little bit about the different models of Palmer and Zaner-Bloser. Danielian is this continuous cursive, which is more similar to what we just looked at from the UK, of like learning the base models there, and then learning to join them up. But it still has the Palmer style G, that unique G. So a little bit, I think also, yeah, this was the italic model that they came up with in the US. Very different from some of the more popular models in the US. sorry, in the UK, and I think they had was it Marion Richardson is, I think it's under England, right? Marion Richardson is one of um, the authors that I will look at in the UK, and I think she had a very influential role, not just in how handwriting was taught in the UK, but also in other European countries and elsewhere. But kind of a little bit of an unsung, hidden figure. And it was Rosemary Sassoon who actually wrote a whole book about her that uncovered a lot of stuff. But yeah, all like old white dudes in the American cursive system, but actually like some very influential and very accomplished women influencing the way that handwriting development worked in the UK, which is nice to kind of counterbalance that. And yeah, I mean, actually, this is like super easy to read, and also much easier to learn to write for kids. So I mean, it's you try not to put value judgments on different ways to write, but more look at like why are they the way they are? How did they develop that way? What were the forces that led to it? But trying to focus on the actual original documents themselves and to add all my commentary. But I encourage you, if you're interested, you should go explore this project. It's all online. Just search for Primarium. And it's super cool. You can see like from like Italy, Peru. There's some really funky ones like, oh yeah, this is like Indonesia. Yeah. Yeah, a super interesting project to look into. But I mean, it's still very academic. Beware. I mean, that's the point of me doing a video on this. Hopefully, it can bring more people's attention to it in something a bit more, edutainment style. But we'll read like the last few comments and then we'll wrap up the stream. I didn't have music on this stream. All the other streams have had some kind of like lo-fi beats, very low in the mix. Some people like that, some people don't. So let me know what you think about just straight voice. I've been listening to some background music just in my ear for myself, but I haven't shared them with you guys. I should have told you to bring your own music. Okay, someone has asked, what do I do professionally and how does it relate to design and typography? So I'm a graphic designer by training, and now I've worked almost 20 years in design. Yeah. And I have been involved in, not like a professional full-time type designer myself, but I've been involved in some type projects like Atkinson, Hyperlegible, been lucky to, and also done some like corporate typefaces in my time, but I've also been working in branding, and now I am kind of I'm a branding specialist as a designer, and so I mostly talk about typography and logo design and branding on my channel, hopefully in a way that is accessible and related to things in pop culture or things that people already know, rather than being too academic and dry. But this is way more information than is in a normal video. Cruel. Some people have put cruel intentions. Ruby says, "Cruel Intentions of Writing," that iconic movie book. Okay, that's I don't know about if that's maybe too old for some to know, which is, yeah, I know. I may just give up on trying to make references that are too contemporary, because I don't know what I'm talking about. I haven't had time to watch a bunch of films in a while. So Harry Potter, his handwriting is magical. Okay, interesting. All else, okay. Austin. Oh, thank you, Austin. That's very nice of you to say. Um, Ellen Lupton is great. She has written a bunch of books over the years about design education stuff. So huge respect to Ellen as well. German, Caitlin talked about the German handwriting that is, and I think Brax as well talked about Sütterlin, which is a really cool thing. Oh, Brax, did you send? Oh my goodness. Thank you, Brax. Or Brox. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Sütterlin, that is like a rabbit hole that I also could fall down. So yeah, German handwriting is super interesting because there was a whole other style of Gothic handwriting, and different offshoots of that. One of the most famous, or one that was taught for a period of time as an alternative to our kind of more mainline Latin, definitely to English Roundhand of those, was Sütterlin. I'm definitely getting the pronunciation of the umlaut incorrect. But it looks super wacky and weird to the unfamiliar. Actually, it might be, is this Germany? It might be in here. But it is, let's see, Germany. I think there may be some examples here. Yeah. This is Courant, and then is there Sütterlin in here? Sütterlin script. Look at that, like, T. The T is super unique. But that's not like the main one, right? I think that's a different version. There's a whole Wikipedia article and stuff about it. I'm super curious about it. But because I'm not someone who speaks or writes German, I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk about it. If you want a video on that, you should not harass, but you should donate to a guy called Typography Guru. And he's got a smaller channel, but a fairly popular website that's aimed more at like type professionals. But I think he's trying to do some more stuff that's aimed at the general public. But he is German, Ralph, and he would be a great guy to explore that. But I would be, talking scheisse, because I don't know if I could deep dive into the backstory very well, only being able to speak and read English. Yeah, Adam has left a very nice comment as well. More cool design stuff is coming 2025. We should hopefully have some interesting videos, mainline videos, on the channel this year. It was really fun to do that video on the crossing button accessibility feature, Swedish, what do they call, pedestrian crossing box design. That was a deep rabbit hole to go down, but really cool. It's actually been featured in the Röhsska Museum in Gothenburg, in their main exhibit now, that crossing box. And I edited a version of my video to be in the exhibit, which is really cool. That's a first for the channel. And I want to try to do some more stuff about accessible design. We'll maybe do a follow-up to that Atkinson hyperlegible video about what's happened with accessible type design since then. But yeah, definitely more new ground, and also definitely trying to do some of the videos that have been in my backlog to make a video on for some time, like this one, firstly, and then something about about casual streetwear and graphic tees. That's all I'll hint at for tonight's stream. But thanks to everyone who joined the stream tonight, and special thanks to those who made very generous donations. And I hope you all have a wonderful new year.